Good morning, I'm Kai Jackson and welcome to On Time. Baltimore Sun journalist Stephanie Haynes stopped pounding the pavement in Charm City to forage the jungle in Mozambique while documenting efforts by an American philanthropist to halt the destruction of that country's largest park. She joins us this morning to talk about the article entitled Greg Carr's Big Gamble in this month's edition of Smithsonian Magazine. Always have a trouble saying Smithsonian. I gotta stop the Smith and the Sonian. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me here.
Welcome home.
Thank you. It's good to be back in Baltimore.
You're a Baltimore native?
I am.
A journalist by profession?
Yes.
And what took you to Africa? What took you to Mozambique?
Well, I worked for the Baltimore Sun for a number of years. I'm still technically an employee there.
Okay.
I'm on leave, yes.
Okay.
My husband is Scott Calvert. He's the foreign correspondent for the Sun in Johannesburg.
Okay.
And so 2 years ago, we moved to Africa, and I've been freelance reporting for that time.
Married journalist, how does that work out? That's another show.
We're on camera.
That's another show, okay. How did you find out about Greg Carr, Stephanie?
You know, I have been working for this organization, a great organization based in D.C. called the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting.
Okay.
And that started about a year ago, and the purpose of that organization is to basically let foreign journalists do our job. It's a horrible time, as you well know, in the industry right now. Foreign bureaus are closing. There's less and less money for freelancers such as myself. And this group basically gives travel funds to let journalists cover issues that are underreported or not reported. And so I started working with them on a project about conflict and environment in Africa, about how those two forces intersect and how they really impact hundreds of thousands of Africans in southern and central Africa. And that, we went to Zimbabwe and documented some trouble there with the current crisis. We went to Rwanda and looked at what happened during the genocide. And then we ended up in Mozambique. We had heard this story about this American philanthropist trying to restore this park and how he wanted to use this park to basically lift that area out of poverty and address some of those humanitarian woes that we hear about all the time, HIV, other health issues, education crises. And so I went there to try to look at what he was doing. And I thought at first it would be one of those in-out stories. Okay, American fixing a park, and then we were finished.
Sounds nice.
But what you found when you got there is that this one park was really an example of all these issues that are going on in Africa right now, especially with Americans going in to try to help Africa. All of the challenges and the tensions, and also the hope and the possibility. And also a lot of ecological questions and development questions. They're all there here. In
your article, you point out something interesting, that when Greg Carr got there, he happened to ask about this park, and the elders, those people who were in leadership positions who remember the Civil War and things of that nature, told him, you shouldn't worry about that. It's just almost like it was a person who had died and they just didn't think about it anymore.
You know, it was totally destroyed. I mean, this park had a higher animal density than on the Serengeti Plain. More lions than anywhere else in the world were in this park.
1,500 square miles we're talking about, right? That's an enormous area. I mean, we're talking about, let's say if we're talking about the East Coast, it's almost to California. Almost heading out in that direction in terms of lengthwise. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Mozambique is a country that's about twice the size of California, and I don't remember exactly how large that park is. Compared to some parks in Africa, it's actually not huge. So you think about all those animals in that one area, and this very important ecological, it's right at the end of the Great Rift Valley.
And why do you, in interviewing him and talking to him, why do you think Greg Carr had this passion for wanting to restore this park?
He has a human rights background. He's the creator of the Carr Human Rights Center at Harvard. He did a lot of work in Idaho, which is his home state. He actually was the person who bought the Aryan Nations compound in Idaho and raised it and turned it into a peace park. And so he started getting interested in humanitarian issues. It's a kind of a natural progression from human rights. And decided to try to address those issues in southern Africa.
From your talking to the people of Mozambique, how did they accept him? Here is this white man coming into Africa with grand plans, and I imagine there were some who were excited about him being there, and maybe there were others who might not have trusted him.
And I think that's really the place where we need to watch this project unfold over a few years. He's working very closely with the Mozambican government, but you know, that's one of the issues with Americans going into Africa. There's definitely cultural you know, there are misunderstandings.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people around the park who are benefiting are happy, but some people are quite nervous. I mean, white people have not been good for Africa,
Right.
you know?
How did you find the children of Mozambique, Stephanie?
They're amazing. You know,
With so much hardship that they've had, I guess that's where I'm going with that.
but you know, kids are kids,
Right.
and people, they're so friendly and they run up, and you know, I have to say also, there was not one child in that park who asks for money. I mean, these
Really?
are amazingly dignified
Right.
and smart people, even though they have been living in a very difficult situation.
And you found the people of Mozambique to be very self-sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, they're dealing with a lot of hardships right there. There was this 16-year civil war, infrastructure is still low, HIV rates are very high.
Right.
But again, people are making do.
Wow. In the grand scheme of things, in terms of Greg Carr's vision and perhaps what you were able to document as a journalist, because he has a mission, but you have a mission as well,
Sure.
in terms of being an observer and documenting what he's doing and interviewing people. What do you see happening to the park in the next 5 to 10 years? And by the way, how does it look now, since he has had some time to invest in it and to try and revive it?
You know, I was lucky because I was there about a year ago and have been going fairly regularly over the past year. And so I've definitely seen some changes. There are more animals now, still not that many, but
Okay.
you can see some.
But it's growing.
It's growing. The park is a breathtakingly beautiful place with all sorts of different ecosystems. Over the next 5, 10 years, I hope that you see changes. I mean, who
Right.
knows? We'll have to follow this as we go.
In your article, you write about an interesting event involving the color red. Can you explain that?
Sure. You know, cultural misunderstandings are a big issue when you have Americans going into Africa.
Okay.
And here I accompanied the Carr Foundation, Greg Carr and his crew. They were going to the spiritual leader of a mountain that's very important for the park's ecosystem.
Okay.
There's a big problem with deforestation on that mountain. It's
Right.
threatening the park. They want it to stop.
All right, there, in fact, what you point out in the article is just acres and acres of land is constantly burned.
Oh, it's horrifying. If you fly over it, you see these just horribly bare patches of trees in this multiple hundreds years old forest.
And they're doing it so they can make room for crops, but there's a downside to it in the future. That's the point, right?
That's the point. People are pushing higher up this mountain. They need to make fields,
Right.
but they're going to be devastating ecological effects.
Wow.
This is not traditional practice. This is an
Right.
evolution of traditional practice, and it's
Okay.
going to harm the overall ecosystem. The people who are running the park believe that if they change what they're doing, it'll actually be better for them in the long
Okay.
run. They'll have ecotourism business, they'll have other agricultural
Sure.
businesses they can start. But so there's this spiritual leader who controls this mountain, and they went to go see the leader. They wanted to convince him to help them.
Yes.
They landed in a red helicopter, not knowing that red was the color of the evil spirits on the mountain. And so
not
everybody's
good.
freaking out.
Wow.
Yeah, wasn't so good. They managed to smooth things over eventually, but it was definitely a faux pas.
That was Greg Carr's helicopter. You point out in the article that it was red, right?
It was red.
Yeah,
Now they're
so
flying around in a different color helicopter.
That might be a good idea. As we close out, I want to thank you for coming on. People are going to be fascinated to read this article. I was certainly fascinated. We talk a lot about the park. What about the people? And how do you think their lives may change? I know Greg wants to save the park, and that's wonderful. Do you think he has the same passion for the people? I'm not saying he doesn't,
Sure.
but you were there, so you know.
You know, the only reason he's doing this park, or one of the main reasons, was to help the people.
Okay.
He came in here with the express goal of benefiting the surrounding community, which isn't necessarily how a lot of these conservation projects get started in Africa. So that's definitely his main goal. I'll be really interested to follow it and see
Right.
what happens. Is this going to be better for the people, or is it not? And that's really my role as a journalist, to keep going and evaluating this, because it will, whatever it does, it will significantly affect hundreds of thousands of people in that region.
Well, I was hanging on your every word, so I can't wait
thank
to
you.
read the next thing you write, Stephanie. You're an incredible writer. It's a fascinating story. When are you heading back to Africa?
Tuesday.
On Tuesday. Well,
Yeah.
we're sorry you're going so quickly, but we wish you a safe journey and can't wait to see you again.
Oh, thanks so much.
Stephanie, thank you so much.
Thanks
We
so much for
appreciate it.
having
Thank
me.
you
It was
very
great
much.
to see you.
Stephanie Haynes, everybody. You can read her article, Greg Carr's Big Gamble, in the May edition of Smithsonian Magazine.